Jeremy.
Okay, let's get started with the April format meeting, and we'll go east to west and call SDIC.
Yeah, thanks, James. I'd like to call the Sandy Drainage Improvement Company Board to order for our April 15th, 2021 meeting. Tom Hansel present. Tanny Stephenson.
Present.
Ken Anderton.
Ken Anderton's present.
SDIC's in quorum.
Great. Thank you, Tom. MCDD.
I'd like to call to order for the April 15th 4-district format meeting. Start with a roll call vote. Kenzie.
Kenzie Berry's present.
Nikki.
Nikki Schultz present.
Nancy.
She just logged on. She's going to be
Okay,
on shortly.
great. Corky.
Corky Collier present.
And then it looks like Nancy will join us. We're in quorum right now. So we'll call this to order.
Thank you, Ken. Ken 2.
This is Val Humble calling the Peninsula 2 Drainage District Supervisor Board meeting to order. Val Humble present. Karen Myers.
Karen Myers present.
Mary Helen Kincaid.
Mary Helen Kincaid present.
Leslie Sawyer.
Leslie Sawyer present.
Kathy Kellen.
Kathy Kellen present.
All supervisors present and accounted for. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Val. This is James Allison, Penn 1 Board President, calling the April 15th format board to order. Claudio Campuzano.
Present.
Annalisa Kohler.
Present.
Jeff Noodleman.
Present.
And this is James Allison, Board President. I'm present. Emerald Bogue is going to be transitioning off the board. She'll be replaced by PJ Christopher, who's a business operations manager, property manager for the port. I think we'll be doing some onboarding for PJ over the next month, and look forward to their presence at that time. But we have quorum and we are in session. Moving on to, let's see, looks like we're recording. So this is my official announcement of the audio recording. Item B, do we have any public testimony?
Not that I know of. As far as open space, I wanted to take this time in the room with me, about 14 feet away, is Nick Hogan. He's our new CFO. So I just wanted to take the opportunity to introduce him and let you all know that he's present.
Great, thank you, Emily. Thank you, Nick. Okay, moving down the agenda, item number C, MCDD, selection of officers. Emily?
Sure. So as you all know, following your annual landowner meetings, you need to officially designate for the next year the officers for your boards. And so MCDD just had a successful landowner meeting a couple of weeks ago. And so I just wanted to ask you all to formally designate who you'd like as your president and secretary for the next year. And then it's also, I think, a good time to make sure that you're good with your designation for budget liaison, which, as a reminder, for those roles, as far as president, it's really presiding over meetings and sort of a little bit of extra back and forth with me on agenda setting. Secretary typically had involved like some check signing duties, which are now at least currently electronic. And then the budget liaison is really kind of like a check-in and a little extra engagement with Casey and I at the beginning of the budget process. So if the MCD board wouldn't mind briefly discussing and designating their officers for the next year.
All right. I guess we should do the president first. So any motion on who should be the president?
I move Ken Anderton president for the coming year.
A second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Thank you very much. I'm honored.
Oh, you'll regret it.
Thank you. Okay, what's the other officer? The secretary, right?
Yes.
Any nominations for secretary?
I'll nominate myself to continue as secretary.
And I'll second.
All in favor? Aye.
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 And thank you, Nikki, for volunteering. You did an awesome job. And any other officer positions open?
I just wanted to confirm, as far as budget liaison, what you'd like to do this year?
Who would volunteer to be the budget liaison? I think I think I did it this year, right?
Yes. Mhm.
And I'm open to anybody who wants to do it other than me, but I'm happy to do it.
I'll nominate Ken Anderton to do it.
Second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
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 Thanks again for the vote of confidence. I think that wraps up our officer selection. Oh,
That's
Nancy has a
it.
question.
Ken,
Yes.
this is Nancy. Do I just have to say I'm in the meeting? Because I think you did roll call before I got here.
I did, and I'd like to acknowledge Nancy Hendrickson is in the meeting and has been the last 6-7 minutes, so thank you. Emily, anything else?
Nope, that's perfect. Thank you.
And Emily, I'm sorry, I don't know this. We also, Penn One and the other boards designate liaisons. When do we do that?
As far as the designation, usually I try to wrap that into your officers. And if you all want to discuss, I think those meetings will probably be happening in the next 3 to 4 weeks. So if you want to confirm or discuss it additionally, now would be a fine time. In fact, the best time, I think, since it's coming up soon. And I have Claudio for Penn One, and in Penn Two, Karen, and then Tanny and STIC for
And
budget
I'm
liaison.
happy to continue to serve in that role. Also happy to leave it if somebody else wants it.
I would second that sentiment.
I wonder if yeah, I wonder if we should table this. Not that we don't. I mean, because we have to go through secretary and budget liaison and president. Do we?
No,
I guess my
I
question.
only needed MCDD to do that. The rest of you
Great,
all
okay.
are good to go. It's just following your landowner meeting. They just had theirs.
Gotcha. Are we on a calendar? I guess my question is, are we on a calendar basis
Yeah.
for that?
It
Okay.
is. So, and it was thrown off this year because of COVID, and you all had your landowner meetings at the end of last year, but normally we do STIC in June and Penn One in July and Penn Two in October. And we'll be doing it that way this year. So you can look forward to soon landowner meetings.
Okay, great. So Claudio, you still have a few more months to raise campaign finances for your bid for the.
I was going to say, you know, all those questions made me worry you didn't want to be president anymore.
Nope. Okay. So I guess we can move on now to item D, the feasibility study work plan with Mark.
Great. Thank you. Just going to bring my screen up for you all. Okay. Can everyone see my screen? Okay, great. Well, thanks. I just want to give a brief update on the feasibility study, which I think more increasingly, since we are actually ending the feasibility phase, we're going to be calling the Portland Metro Levee System project. So you'll see that vernacular being used since we're completing the study phase. And so we're currently waiting for the final report to go through the Corps chain of command. We expect that process to complete in October, at which point hopefully we'll get the district engineer's signature on it, and there'll be a few other approval steps beyond that at the Assistant Secretary of the Army and OMB. But in the meantime, I think as we've indicated in the past, there's a lot of work to be done. I'm going to use I'm going to use this timeline on this next slide as kind of a structured format to kind of help go through it. There's a lot on this slide. This slide should look familiar. We've added some items to it, and this timeline is in your board packet. So you have it for reference as I go through the following slides, but I'll take a quick moment to use this structure. And I'm going to focus on this time period here in the red box, which is approximately the 18 months that we have until we get to the execution of a design agreement. I want to caveat that first and foremost, this is kind of along the best laid plans. We have certain assumptions, we have certain best cases. We've communicated this before. If everything goes well, this is potentially our fastest track to moving towards a design agreement and construction. So all these design phases and the construction phase, those are all predicated based on authorization and funding occurring as the Corps district team has communicated up as being the best possible arrangement and the most feasible arrangement. And we've sort of worked out this calendar as well, kind of telegraphing when we think certain things are going to happen. And when we presented this timeline before, this big black line at 2025 was also communicated as when we will have that financial capability to proceed into construction. And so I just want to keep pressing those points so that you're clear on that. So these design phases are also negotiable. There may be a time where I should say the construction phases that correspond to this, some of them are off the chart, but there's certain increments that we expect to start with, just depending on circumstances and the amount of funding that we receive. These things could kind of come out of order, but we've done the best to provide a realistic expectation for what will occur down the road. Okay, without bludgeoning that point any further. So you can see that if we have a design agreement towards the end of this box, then moving backward, we have to negotiate that design agreement with our partners, with the Corps, because there'll be in-kind services and things like that that get baked into that design agreement, into the scope of that agreement. And ahead of that, we kind of have to sit there and look within ourselves and see what are our needs before we go into that negotiation and try to anticipate the needs of our partners and other folks that are going to be cooperating with us. For instance, the city of Portland, we're going to be potentially upheaving a major right of way. So all those things kind of have to be considered and baked into those things. So we're prepared to go into design. I should emphasize so that we are prepared to go into design. Next item down here is betterments and CIP plans. That just means like certain projects that we have to kind of consider. Are there any projects that we need to move forward with that are in the plan that we'll get credit for if we do ahead of construction? But we have to kind of consider how those things get sequenced, how necessary they are. And then upgrades beyond what's in the plan and whether we do those ahead of time or later. So there'll be a lot of thought about ahead of time about relocation so that when we get into design phase, we're not caught flat-footed, considering how to, particularly the Penn 2 Bridgeton Marine Drive roadways, all the things that go into that and the costs associated and some of the planning associated. And then down further, you'll see, I'll talk about this a little more on the other slides, just HDRW and real estate, all the work. I think we've communicated all the work that needs to go into that ahead of time. But so we are definitely not cooling our heels and just sitting around and waiting for that final report to get signed. Before I move on, if any quick clarifying questions, this is a lot to look at here. Okay.
Hey, Mark.
Yes.
So I know we've all the districts are, building budgets. I know one topic that we kind of have still unanswered, and I think we're, looking out a couple of years to take care of it, but it's the cost sharing. I haven't seen that clarity of what each district needs to be, planning for. This, it's all conditioned on when the urban, stands up and has a financing plan. Do you have a sense of when? I mean, seeing this timeline, it's really helpful. When do you think there will be some certainty around, anything, right? So we're kind of waiting for the urban to, to bring the money to the table. But in the meantime, I think we have to have a plan B of how do we fund this as 4 districts.
That is a great segue to some of the slides that are coming up, Tom. I hope to explain that a little bit better. But in short, there is going to be a lot of flexibility required. We just received some new numbers on PED, and I'm going to present that to you at the end of my talk here. And that shouldn't change very much, but obviously we haven't negotiated our design agreement, so there's some flexibility, and there's some final policy review ongoing right now that could tweak those numbers. But the PED numbers are fairly certain. And as far as the timing of when these things are slated to happen, we can do our best to answer those questions now. But yeah, until we have been really trying to drill down further with the core and get some answers on this, and especially sequencing and when things happen. With respect to funding, I'm going to talk about that a little bit briefly here too, because there's some work on that in our that will be covered under our budget request. So maybe I'll come back to this at the end, and we can make sure that there's remaining questions, we can capture them and bring you answers to the next meeting.
Hey, Mark, can I just quickly ask, what is PED? I might be the only one in the Zoom room, but I can't keep up with all the acronyms.
Sure. Yeah, there's a lot. We keep throwing them at you. We try to say them over and over again, but that doesn't mean that they're going to stick. PED means pre-construction. Sometimes a visual is good. It's the pre-construction engineering and design phase. And in short, that is the design phase. When we do PED ahead of design ahead of authorization, it's called PED. And then once a project is authorized, then the Corps basically bakes it into the project partnering agreement and calls it engineering during construction. So I've tried to put that in this timeline for you here. It's the design of phase 2, engineering during construction, because we've started the project partnering agreement, and we essentially have ended the design agreement early because we've gotten authorization and we've started. But the short answer is PED means design phase. Okay. So this slide kind of, I wanted to talk about board decisions prior to PED. The next slide talk about, we'll talk about the costs of all this, and it sort of is roughly similar to this, but to some of the items here, because everything comes with a cost. So the work that we're doing that I alluded to in the previous slide, that all will come, those things will all come to will create decision points for the boards in the end. So the first decision point right now is funding to support this ongoing work, and that's in the budget requests that are being considered by the budget process right now. That includes allowance for staff time and contractor support of real estate gap analysis. That should be familiar to you. We've been talking about that for a while, and last year we had a budget request for real estate gap analysis work, tuning up, refining our easement organization related to the future needs of the PMLS project. The second item kind of captures a little bit of what Tom alluded to, and we put a small amount of budget in the budget request to bring in financial consultant to help us explore funding alternatives and make sure that we put our best foot forward on this, and we have examined all the alternatives to help us address the issue, knowing that we are a couple years out on hopefully having a more robust revenue model to help us pay for construction. But how do we get to PED in the best manner possible? There's legal staff time. In the past, we've sort of we've made do, but we think the demands are going to be greater as we go towards PED in terms of resolving some of these things, working on MOUs with some of our partners, working on our design agreements, making sure we have good legal advice. And so we put some time and money into legal staff services, staff time, as well as contract staff support. Then there's real estate and engineering consulting for the acquisition relocations plan. The relocations plan is essentially work on the golf course, work on the Marine Drive Bridgeton Road relocation, utility relocations. And then the HGRW, we've spoken to that point quite a bit, so I'm not going to rehash that a whole lot, but we want our on-call contractor to look at the work that the Corps has done and make sure there's no gaps in their risk assessment of any environmental contamination that we might find incidental to construction. And so the first decision on that point, and you'll see that's lower in the slide, first point is just getting the funding to allow our consultants to do that work. The next, so that's all surrounding budget requests. The next bullet point is just the allocation for PED. And we'll talk about that amount here in a short minute, but so the first cost is the budget request for all this associated work, then the allocation for PED, and then when the results come back from some of these things, there'll be another decision point. Like when the results come back from that assessment on HDRW, we'll be asking the boards, how do you want to deal with this? Do you want to put some money aside for contingency when we get to construction? How will we do that? Who will do that? And also, or do we want to do some additional investigation to kind of capture that risk a little bit more accurately? Because the Corps has only identified one site with risk. Other board decisions will be how to deal with local regulations. We've kind of mentioned this before. A lot of local stakeholders, permitting agencies are concerned that the Corps is using their federal supremacy mandate or waiver, if you will, to not meet local regulations to the fullest. They're certainly meeting local standards and regulations to the extent they're required to under their federal regulations, but that sometimes leaves some gaps. I talked about betterment projects. That is in the case of some, say for instance, pump stations, we've identified need to go even beyond the upgrade recommended by the Corps. And so how do we proceed with those? And then there'll be decisions about partner agreements. And that is bringing in resources. Let's say our partners at the City of Portland have resources that can help us implement some of these projects better. How do we capture those resources? How do we get them into the design scope with the Corps of Engineers? And then and how do we just bring those resources to bear on the work ahead, either pre-PED or during PED, so that we get the best product out of the design phase. And then lastly, I kind of alluded to this in the legal section, we have to negotiate a design agreement. So those things are all sort of interrelated, especially those first and last two. So those are sort of some of the decisions that are going to be required of the boards in the future. And again, it always comes down to money. The total, some of those involve money, that there is a total cost of PED. I'm going to show you the next slide. I'm going to show you the cost of PED per se, what the Corps is going to be invoicing us for PED and over what timeline, but these other things all require resources. And the good news is right now, those are pretty well captured in our budget request amount, which you'll weigh in on. Those are just our annual budgets. And then there's the PED amount. So I kind of want to pause here before I give you the update on the PED amount and make sure that all this is clear. I think there's a lot of sort of repetition here. I'm kind of coming at things from a different angle, but so I want to make sure that you don't have any questions.
It looks like Nancy has a question.
Yeah, I do. And I am, it's a pretty simple question because I really appreciate you putting together, board decisions and things like that on the slide. It helps me keep my eye on the ball on what the board needs to do. But I don't see that in my packet. I'm wondering if you can send, I see the swim lanes, updated swim lanes, which is really very nice to have on hand because that's something I'm not going to be able to memorize. Would you be able to send on those board action slides that you just showed as well?
Absolutely, be happy to send that. Sometimes we like to yeah, we'll provide that. Sometimes like to give you the meat before and give it in context. So before we present it, so you will be seeing that right after this. Okay, not further ado, drum roll. And I'm just going to preface, we got some revised figures from the core on PED. There's several reasons for that. One of the main reasons is the core continued to go through several layers of technical review and such, and so the numbers had not been fully certified. So more recently, the core provided us with new PED figures. They're based on an increase. It's a significant increase. That does also include a 25% contingency for PED, and it does include what is now a certified cost estimate that's been certified by their cost center, and they baked everything in. So it's been fully vetted. Unless there are any unanticipated policy decisions made in the next 6 months, these numbers, we should have a high level of confidence in these numbers. But again, a little bit of a caveat on that. The distribution of these numbers has changed too, whereas before we had sort of a gradual roll up the first year and a peak sort of the second year. The court revised our expectations on that and front loaded the design costs because they're letting design contracts up front. So again, as I said before, some of this cost will come down, but it won't be significant. It won't be something you want to hedge on based on in-kind services that we provide. The Corps is probably going to try to limit the amount of in-kind services unless they really need something that's very specialized that we or our partners can provide. So I would work off of these figures again based on a 25% contingency, so it could come in lower, but this is the number I think conservatively we should work with. Does anyone have any questions on this slide?
Yeah, Mark, it seems that the increase is about a 33%, which is significant. But I'm assuming that that's actually 25% contingency plus another an increase of 8%. Am I wrong about that?
Hopefully you're correct and I'm incorrect. When I did the numbers, it was actually a 45% increase, 145% of the previous value, so depending on how you're calculating it, but 25% of that is contingency. So that was sort of a 20% markup based on actual known costs.
And was there anything in that 20% that disturbed you?
Well, again, it's sort of a parametric cost. It's sort of the unit costs and things like that they used. The PED is based on a percentage of the overall construction costs or certain components of the construction costs. So I think they rearranged that. They didn't actually, the design phase is not based on actually costing out specific tasking during the design phase. It's just a percent markup, and I don't believe that markup changed. What they based the markup on within the construction estimate changed, and so that's where that increase came from. items that might have more risk or might require more design. So they increased what that percentage was based off.
And then last question along these lines. I would anticipate in the coming year for there to be significant new engineering and construction in the region, which may very well drive these costs up a notable amount. At what point, how much should we anticipate that? What point can we kind of lock in some numbers here?
Well, I think what you're speaking to construction costs going up. Is that, am I?
And pre-engineering as well.
Okay, just because of increased demand and on our contractors available. Well, at this point, with respect to PED and with respect to design, the Corps has not confirmed whether or not they will be doing the design work themselves 100%, or to what extent they'll be outsourcing it. They've said that their plan is all along is that they think they have the capacity and they will be doing it in-house. Most of post TSP they did in-house. TSP they got help from Tetra Tech, and so we don't know which way it'll go. If they stay with their plan, then I think they'll probably hold to their costs, be able to hold to their costs better if they keep it in-house. So does that help answer your question?
That answers it very well. Thank you. And that's comforting. Thank you.
I can't guarantee it's always right. They're always managed to give us a little curveball, but they also are sometimes very consistent on that. So,
well, it sounds like if they do outsource it, it's going to be a relatively small amount.
Yeah, it would have to be something. I think it would have to be something unforeseen that would take away from their capacity. I mean, I know it's sometimes, but on the design front, I don't know. I can't imagine what that would be. I mean, they sometimes deal with wars abroad and things like that, and I don't anticipate those things seem to be going away. So some of those risk factors, deploying personnel and suddenly not having that in-house capacity.
Yeah.
I have a question, and this is way out of my bandwidth ball. There's people that know more about this, but how will, or is there any effort to coordinate with, be involved with the new, Biden's infrastructure package? I mean, because is there some way that we can like be in the room when the party happens and they hand out the money? I guess that's, I know Lou Frederick, Tina Kotek, several other elected officials are knowledgeable about it, but at the state level, and Earl Blumenauer and Ron Wyden have been supportive. But I just, I know in instances like this, either in a small way and a big way, if you aren't in the room waving your arm saying, here I am, nobody's going to give you anything. So I don't, when you talked about coordination of efforts, is it including any of those potential sources of money?
That's a great question. I think I want to defer that to Colin because he's kind of going to follow on to this slide with something that's more related to that issue entirely. So, okay.
Sorry, no, and related to that, when you talk about betterment projects and the coordination of upgrades, at my level, no one seems to talk to each other unless you make them or ask them. And so I know it's really beneficial to have Nancy and Mike Jordan and other city employees involved to bring this to awareness. But is there some sort of plan to how that will coordinate, or do we just hope it happens?
I know we're running low on time, but in short, we'll say that there is an effort to coordinate with the city of Portland. We have been, we're not just getting started on that negotiation portion that I mentioned earlier. We've been starting to talk to Caitlin Lavelle and Nancy in order to work on some of those issues and make sure that we are aligned with the city. So betterments is just one part of that process, and you'll hear more about that as we come up with as we start to work through those items a little bit more and have some answers and some things to share.
Okay, thanks.
So I'll turn it over to Colin. I know we went a little long, but I think he has an important item to add, and he might be able to help answer Mary Helen's question.
Okay, yeah, thanks, Mark. Yeah, just very pleased to touch on a couple of those questions that we are staying involved in the discussion through our federal lobbyist, and she is tracking where the discussions are, whether it's earmarks or exactly what the American Recovery Plan will look like and how we can position ourselves. So we are definitely pushing on that. And as Mark noted, we're staying connected with our regional partners as well. I just wanted to take a couple minutes to give you a quick update. In your packet, there was a memo regarding the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers Portland Metro Levee System request for early action. There's no written request from the Army Corps of Engineers, and so there's no real board action that needs to be taken at this time, but we wanted to give you an update that in late March, the Corps project team for our project met with their superiors at Northwest Division before sending the recommended plan to headquarters. And they did reach out to us asking if we, as the non-federal sponsor, the drainage districts, would be interested in or able to begin some preliminary activities toward PED as early as the upcoming fiscal year 22. And so that would include a local match. And so at this time, staff's recommendation is that we do not pursue that request and turn it into a written request from the Corps. And there's three reasons why we make that recommendation, but we definitely want to solicit input from the boards if there is a preference to move forward faster. The three pieces are around capacity, timing, and funding. On capacity, as Mark laid out, there is a lot of staff time that is needed to work on some of the real estate issues, as well as some of the coordination with different partners, the hazardous toxic radioactive waste, and also trying to secure the funding, which brings me to the second one, which is funding. 35% of that $5.6 million we would have to be able to provide a first increment, which would be probably over $500,000 spread amongst the 4 districts, and then continue to fund the PED activities after that. With the inclusion in your budgets for some of the work that's needed before we go into PED, we don't think that that funding would be realistic. And we need the time, we need the next 18 months to really pursue how we will fund that next PED phase. And then the third is timing. We actually put ourselves at some risk as far as the construction phase by getting into the PED phase too early. It is expected to be a 2, maybe 3-year process. If we go into that phase earlier, it means we will get it done a year earlier, which will put us at risk of not having the urban flood safety water quality districts revenue structure established, and so that the construction phase to be funded through that, or potentially through something like a geo bond not being ready. So for those 3 reasons, staff is not recommending that we pursue kind of going into PED a year earlier, but definitely wanted to open it up to the board if there is a preference for us to actually pursue sort of the request in writing from the Corps to move forward with this.
Great. Thank you, Colin. Do people have questions, comments about process and decision-making around this?
This is Val Humble. I appreciate those the analysis of the reasons there. They do seem very cogent, and I do recognize that it is the 4 board's decision. But I would be interested in what the Urban Flood Safety Board would like to have happen. Could we get them to look at it and have them advise us what they would prefer we do?
Yes, I think we can bring that alongside some other requests from, on kind of contingency planning for paying for this. And I think that could be a coordinated request. It's not, they have a meeting this coming Monday, so it would probably need to wait to a subsequent meeting. But I do think that that's part of a coordinated strategy to make sure that they're providing input on sort of how to get to the construction phase, if that is expected to be paid for through their funding.
Thanks, Colin. Thanks, Val. I might recommend somewhat abbreviated process with the new board by maybe just taking an informal question to the president, Mike Jordan, and to Tanny Stephenson, who I think is convening the budget subcommittee. That might be a good way to get a pretty nuanced answer on the pros and cons of pursuing our normal course as opposed to an accelerated schedule.
And so I think that's a good approach. And when Peggy is back, I think we can coordinate with her to make sure that that all syncs up. And the last thing that I think was just a gap was making sure that we touch on Tom's question, which is a number of board conversations that need to happen. The plan is to talk through at the individual board meetings, have a discussion around some of the allocation, especially since we have refined, updated numbers that have gone up, to talk through the different boards about what their preferences and options are, and then to give direction to staff. As you can see, for next fiscal year, there is a budget request in there, as well as staff time and capacity to put toward some either public or private funding options that are outside of your property assessments to pay for the PED phase. And so over the next 18 months, we really do need to figure that out. And over the next 6 months, with the board's direction, to come to an agreement on allocation and what the best avenues to pursue to fund those are.
It looks like Kenzie has her hand up.
Thanks. I'm getting up to speed on all of this, so I am going to make a general comment that I hope will get sharper over time, if you'll allow that. I know we're doing an inventory of the assets and liabilities of each district, and I'd be interested in the intersection of how that and this conversation may be able to dovetail together. If there's an additional liability related to this that could be added to that calculation. Again, next meeting, it'll be a little sharper. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions for Mark or Colin?
Yeah, this is Claudio. I'll jump in. Really appreciate the responsible and practical approach that staff is taking. I think we've got a lot of complexity on our hands, a lot of timing issues. You guys have been working towards those for quite some time, and suddenly accelerating does feel a little out of place. So appreciate that. Just I noted in the memo that you talked about maybe some perception issues around our desire not to move more quickly, and talk through a little bit about sort of the management of that perception. And so appreciate that, and hope to hear more about how those conversations go, to the degree that we end up not moving forward with this accelerated schedule. And one other question, besides the perception issues that were raised in the memo, was wondering about, does staff get a sense that this might be a train leaving the station kind of moment? Like, is there I know that we've been looking towards sort of funding, funding events going forward, and really trying to set ourselves up for those. Is there any concern about sort of missing a moment?
That's a great question, Claudio. And at least from what we have heard from core headquarters, our connection to the Urban Flood Safety Water Quality District and putting together a more robust funding source, not just to pay for construction, but what they're really looking for is good stewardship of the federal investment in years to come and for O&M and for future capital. And so if we connect it to that sort of fiscal responsibility, I don't see any issues. There's a number, I think the bigger thing is that there's a number of these feasibility studies that are coming up, but I think because they were all funded through the storm supplemental, but I think that's more making the case to the federal government that they probably need a different approach than they've used in the past for funding them, which has usually been a handful, say 5 or 6 projects a year, and just sort of letting small amounts out. And so leveraging some larger infrastructure funding to maybe move into the next phase on this kind of glut of projects that are coming out. So not leaving the station, I think we have a really good financial, responsible message behind it that the core headquarters and our district team definitely recognize.
I have one other question, and I don't know whether Evan's on a call or not, but I didn't hear anything about involvement of the community, and changing the name is going to be big. I mean, people aren't going to forget Levee Ready Columbia and know what PMSL is. Is there a plan, and when will that start to happen? Because I guess I say this way too many times. It's going to be the taxpayers and the landowners that are going to have to agree to this. And if we make them mad, we're going to lose all chance of getting any kind of funding. And mad or confused, and it only takes a handful. So,
and just a quick note, Mary Helen, what Mark was noting, so we've been calling this the feasibility study for most board communication because that was the phase that we were in, but it's all under the umbrella of the CORS project, which is called the Portland Metro Levee System Study. And so what Mark was noting was that we were changing, when we talk about, instead of talking about the feasibility study, while we're moving into the subsequent phases, to discuss it as the Portland Metro Levee System Study. So you'll see that PMLS.
I understand that, and the people here will, but when you go to a neighborhood association, Bridgeton, East Columbia, Cully, they're not going to understand. And anyway, that can be another conversation, another agenda topic, but I think it's going to be a really important one when we talk about working with partners. I don't know the population, but in East Columbia, you got 1,700 partners that you got to bring on board, or because I'm going to be charged with finding money up property assessments, and I'm going to have to explain that. And I don't feel comfortable doing that at this time because we've changed names too many times. And you saw what happened when Bridgeton misunderstood about what was going to happen in the road raising, changing, all of that. So I just want to put it out there that we need to consider community landowners as well as partners that have deeper pockets, but the landowner has more influence. So
that's great, and having a coherent and cogent identity is important.
Super, thank you, Mary Helen. I think we'll go ahead and move on with in our agenda, just noting we have an action item to reach out to the new district about this question of schedule. So moving on to new business, item E. Do we have any new business from the boards or the staff?
I've got nothing from the staff end of things.
Okay. Seeing, hearing no new business, I believe SDIC and Penn One boards need to adjourn. Maybe we'll call for SDIC first, please.
SDIC is adjourned. Thank you, James. Thanks all.
Great. Thank you, Tom. Thanks to SDIC.
Take care.
I'll go ahead and adjourn the Penn One board. Emily, do I need to stay on to preside, or will that be done by someone else?
Hope we can kick it to Ken from here on out.
Great, super. Thank you, Ken. All right, well, Pen 1 is adjourned, and thank you to SDIC and Pen 1, and as always, thanks to Pen 2 and MCDD as well. Have a good day, folks.
Thanks, Leslie.
So as I noted over email this morning, we're doing a changeover in the agenda, and rather than the agenda item that we have listed, Bill and Hong, we're going to discuss a development review topic for Pen 2.
Thanks, Emily. I believe this won't take too long, but just in the last couple of days, we've run across some information regarding a development in Pen 2, specifically the site at 1501 North Schmear Road. This is the triangular area between I-5 and Denver Avenues and just north of Schmear Road. And this is a development that's been going on for some time, and it actually predates our development review fee structure. And so we have not been collecting any money from the developer to date to support that project. But what we have done, or have realized recently, that there's a fair amount of significant real estate work involving easements and associated existing easements and future easements associated with that project. And so what we'd like to do is today is to inform the Pen 2 board about this and the possibility of entering in a fee agreement with the developer, so the developer could pay Pen 2 for expenses related to real estate. So Hong's going to step in and give a little more detail.
Sure, thank you, Bill. That was an excellent overview, and I just want to note that under the existing 547 statute, each drainage district has an authority to condition any site's hookup to our drainage system on any conditions or qualifications, depending on what their impacts are. As Bill has mentioned, and I can tell you of 18 years of law practice, I have never seen a site with such a complex real estate history in light of the flood control work that we do. We have an obligation under the Flood Control Act when the Corps contributed money to the Pen 2 system back in the 30s, 40s, 50s to obtain and secure and retain easements to facilitate those projects, just as similar easements that we'll be expected to get for these future projects that are coming. But these are legacy easements, and at this site, there are a multitude of them all over. Some of them you can read, some of them you cannot read, like literally you can't read it because the printing is so bad. And so we've been in negotiation with the landowner to update the easements. They've asked for, they've made some requests that we've agreed to, but very recently they've changed their request so significantly so that it may impact our ability to comply with our promises to the Corps related to these legacy easements. So without going much further forward, because of the complexity of it, it requires some fairly significant legal work to review and analyze their request. And so with that, I've worked with Bill and the developer to agree to some form of coverage for the Pen 2 board with respect to these additional costs that we may be seeing in dealing with these real estate requests. So relying on the ORS authorities, even though this development project came into our office before the ordinance that formalized the fee recovery program, we're able to recover or can pursue the recovery of costs if the board decides that it's a reasonable condition to do to impose on the development here. My proposal would be that we would enter into a service agreement with the landowner, provide a not to exceed sort of an amount and that we can then start charging them once there is mutual written agreement between us and the developer on the recovery of those fees. So with that, I'll open it to questions for the Pen 2 board, if any.
Is TMT still the landowner and leasing to Pro Lodges / Amazon?
So this site is not the Portland Meadows site. It's the
No,
one.
no, I know, but TMT used to own that piece of
Okay.
property.
On the paperwork that I've seen, the landowner is listed as Hayden Meadows.
Okay, that's TMT.
Okay.
And just because I'm kind of twisted up with them in a variety of ways, with TMT / Hayden Meadows, if it's of any help, I will, speak as a Pen 2 supervisor. I've been their proxy voter in Pen 2 for a number of years, about concern that we, do this. And I'm fully supportive of going to them and saying, I think I've said this before, but Pro Lodges, Amazon, TMT, I don't care who it is, but I don't want their actions to cause our landowners any money because of development. And Bill knows I've said that, and I'm more than willing to say it again. I would hope that they would all be in agreement that this costs money and we shouldn't be charging my neighbor to pay for what they're doing for their profit.
Yeah, so go ahead, Bill.
Yeah, to their credit, Mary Helen and others, when we brought this concept up to them, they seem to be willing to pay for these type of legal fees. It's just a matter of negotiating the final dollar amount. So they seem to be receptive to the idea.
Okay.
So this is Val Humboldt. So that you're not really anticipating any difficulties in it. You're just looking for an official request or official authorization from the board to proceed doing this. Is that correct?
Correct. The statute requires it. Yes. Yes, sir.
Okay. Do we need then some kind of resolution or what kind of, okay.
I have this motion if this works.
Thank you.
Okay, I'll go ahead. I move to require, or we should move to require the connection of the development project at the Bar None site to the district's drainage system on the condition any consultants or expert costs related to real estate issue Pen 2 incurs from the time of mutual agreement be recovered as service charges. Just a question to that, because to the discussion part, does that include my intent that the landowners aren't going to pay any money?
So this is a condition that we can recover from them, just outside consultant or expert fees related to just the real estate issues. It's not a comprehensive coverage. There will be staff time.
To Mary Helen.
I'll second. I'll do that. I'll second it. It's Karen.
Okay. Is there any discussion? Roll call vote. Val Humble votes aye.
Karen Myers votes aye.
Mary Helen?
Mary Helen votes aye.
Leslie?
Leslie Sawyer votes aye.
Kathy?
Kathy Kellen votes aye.
Voting is unanimously in favor of the motion. It is passed.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So the next item is regarding surplus property disposal. I think hopefully this will be quick. I believe there's a one pager in the packet that outlined like the requirements and that we just need an agreement from you all to dispose of some surplus property. So if you have any questions on those items, I think now would be a good time. Josh is present and as well as Bill. Otherwise, we could just take a motion from both MCDD and Pen 2 to authorize that surplus property disposal as outlined in the documents.
Since Pen 2 only has the, one motor, one old obsolete motor on the surplus mowing, let's go first. Do I have a motion from a board member that we permit the disposal of that old motor?
So moved.
Thank you, Mary Helen. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Leslie. Any discussion? All in favor, Val Humble says aye. Karen?
Aye.
Mary Helen?
Aye.
Leslie?
Aye.
Kathy?
Aye.
Unanimously passed. The go ahead and dispose of the motor. I think that means that's the end of the business for Pen 2. Is that correct?
Correct.
There is one comment I'd like to leave with the staff regarding the item on the agenda that we skipped over, the drainage district line, or excuse me, the pump station discharge lines. I noticed that the increased cost, which gives me heartburn, doesn't lower the cost for the putting in and filling the hole and gravel. And it seems to me that if a large part of that cost was the permitting, if we're forced to get the permit anyway for the bank reinforcement, that maybe the cost of instead of putting a diverter at the end, filling the hole with gravel or some other non-erodible material, that cost of that should go down. Just an observation. Would someone, before we bring that back on the agenda, look at that issue of whether if we're forced to get a permit anyway, then maybe we don't need to include the cost of the permit in the filling one. Anyway, is there any other comments of any other board member before we adjourn? Pen 2 is now adjourned. Thanks for showing up.
Thank you. Bye.
All right, I think we need to go through the same process on the consent agenda. Anybody have questions, first of all, on the consent on disposal of property?
It looks like the dump truck that we're about to talk about is on this list, like for disposal.
That's correct.
What does PS stand for? Question.
Pump station.
Thank you.
And do I have a motion to, any other questions, I guess, on the surplus property? I guess we're going to hear after this, the dump truck contract approval, but wanted to get the consent out of the way.
So moved.
Okay, second?
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Motion carries. I say aye as well. Okay, Bill, I think you're on.
Okay. This is regarding the purchase of the 12-yard dump truck, Ken?
Yes.
Okay. Hopefully it's fairly straightforward. We provided you a background summary page about what we were able to find, and we followed contracting rules to get us to this point. And this is a purchase we have been has been identified in the CIP for a couple of years, and now we've come to this to the point of requesting the purchase. So because the amount is over the threshold that the executive director can sign just by herself, we need a motion from the board to approve this purchase. So any questions for us?
With no questions, could I get a motion to approve?
This is Corky. I'll move to approve and authorize the executive director or their designee to negotiate and sign a contract for the purchase of a 12-yard dump truck with a maximum contract value of $157,000.
Could I get a second for the motion?
I'll second.
Nancy says second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. And
Aye.
the motion carries.
Thank you.
And now we're on to the next topic, which I was wanting to get to ASAP because this is a very important topic. And I also wanted to acknowledge Kenzie Berry. This is her first board meeting. I should have acknowledged that to start with. I'm such a bad president. I promise you I will get better at this organization. But I just want to acknowledge her as being the newest board member here and welcome. She's got great knowledge and we're so looking forward to your contribution.
Thank you. Looking forward to digging in.
Welcome, Kinsey.
Thanks, Courtney.
All right, are we ready, Mary?
I'm ready.
Okay,
Sure.
Mary's going to give background on the executive director recruitment. First of all, I just wanted to apologize that we sent you information late. It's been kind of a rapid process, and on the back end of the process, I'm not sure that we got it quite figured out. We were kind of a little bit on the fly, and it just honestly, we probably could have done a better job of outreaching to the board members that weren't part of the process, because myself, Corky, and Nancy participated, but Nikki and Kenzie, you did not, and so I apologize if we didn't reach out and get you information as fast as we could. So just wanted to acknowledge that. Mary is going to go through the process we went through in a summary, and feel free to ask her any questions. This is just kind of an open discussion at this point.
Okay. Thank you, Ken. Greetings to all the board members here. And I was brought on to recruit for the executive director position of MCDD. And a survey was sent out to all board members and staff at the end of last calendar year, to survey board and staff as to what they thought were the key competencies and skills needed in the next executive director position. It sounds like, Kenzie, that you're new and you probably didn't have an opportunity to weigh in on that. But from that, we took what the top three items were by staff and the top three by boards. Summaries were provided back to both to let them know. And then that information was used to guide the process. It was used to develop the job announcement for the executive director recruitment, and also a candidate success profile, which you should have received last night. And I do apologize again for the short notice before the board meeting. And from the job announcement had input from those on the two boards that were selected to be part of the rating panel. That's Ken Anderton, Nancy Hendrickson, Peggy Yates, who's the current executive director, and Mike Jordan, Mary Helen Kincaid, Bob Salinger, Ann Gravitt, and Corky Collier. So they all weighed in on job announcement and had an opportunity to participate in the interviews. The position was open for the month of February. It was left open for 4 full weeks, and it was a national search. Searches are picked up on LinkedIn, Indeed, certainly posted on MCD websites, and also we reached out to partners in diversity and ELGL, trying to get as diverse a candidate pool as possible for the position. When all was said and done, there were 26 applicants, 5 of which were women. There was one veteran in the pool that made himself known as a veteran. I did a first screening on the applicants when it closed, just to ensure that they met minimum qualifications. And then the applications were turned over to Ken, Mike, and Peggy to do a screening and to see which ones came out as the top candidates for a broader pool to be interviewed by the rating panel. The first interview was a 30-minute interview, which would have been at the start of March. There were 10 candidates selected for that process. And from that, there were 4 candidates. We'd hoped to narrow it down to 2, but we felt that it would be appropriate to include 4 candidates in the final round of interviews. The final round of interviews, there were 3 men and 1 woman that were interviewed for the position. And their interviews, the second round was pretty extensive what they went through. They were asked to participate in a 45-minute interview with MCDD executive team, also a 30-minute interview with 8 staff members, 4 of management, 4 of non-management. Staff were asked if they wanted to participate, and of those that said yes, 8 were basically randomly selected to participate in that interview. I also asked the 4 finalists for 360 references. So I received references from board members that they had worked with, people that had supervised them, those that they had supervised, and then colleagues. And I contacted those references. So by the time they got to the interview with the raters that I mentioned from the 2 different boards and Peggy, it was a 90-minute interview, which is pretty extensive. They were asked to give a 5 to 10-minute presentation at the start, and then were given a number of questions. At the end of that, I was also able then to provide the rating panel information from the reference checks that the references that I'd received back from each candidate, also input from the exec team interview and from the staff interview. And there was a unanimous sentiment amongst the board members coming out of that process. And with that, I think I will open it up for any, while we're still in public session, open it up for any questions if people have any. And if not, I will turn it back over to Ken.
All right, I believe now we're going to enter into executive session, but wanted to give you opportunity, any more public comments you want to make before we go into executive session? All right, with that, the MCDD board will now enter executive session to consider the employment of a public officer, employee, staff member, or an individual agent pursuant to ORS 192.6602A. And go into regular session.
Sounds good.
And so now we're in regular session, and I'll just summarize where we're at. We've decided to postpone the votes until Tuesday. Proper public notice will be sent out to hire the next executive director for MCDD, or have a vote to hire. And this will give the opportunity to the board members that did not participate in the panel interview process to be able to meet with the candidate. Anything else I missed?
Do you want to go ahead and just put something on the calendar while everyone's in the room? Got it.
Certainly, that'd be great.
My life easier usually.
I am completely free on Tuesday. That's a very unusual thing for me.
Woo!
UP is
Seize
closed.
the whole day. Seize the whole day.
And morning is best for me. I'm free until, I can't believe it either, till 1.
Emily, I already emailed you my availability.
Okay. do you want to do a 10 a.m.?
No, I cannot do 10 a.m.
Okay. Sorry, I don't have it in front of me. I saw your email.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I'm available before 10
Okay.
or between noon and 2 or after 3.
I have the exact same availability as Corky, exactly.
Are we in the same meeting?
If I may ask, if I'm needed in the meeting, I won't be able to do it 11:30 to noon, so maybe a 9 a.m. is a good time.
All right. We plan for 9 a.m. That should be fine. I'll send something out.
Works for me.
Thank you.
All right, any other business? I think MCDD can adjourn if I don't hear anything else. All right, see you. Oh, Nancy.
Just one note, did everyone know that Karan Carijo accepted another job? And yeah, so I just wanted to note how much I appreciated her work jumpstarting us on a lot of things, including the equity and diversity, and look forward to supporting that work in the future.
Yeah, and I think that's a conversation we should have at another board meeting of how that work gets carried forward. So with that, I'm going to end the meeting. You guys are all adjourned, and